right, everybody. Welcome back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Swikle, with two college brothers, moving, storage, and franchising, and the Moving Titan Retreats. Today's guest, I've got Matt DiBara, and Matt is a fourth-generation Mason who created the Contractor Consultants to revolutionize recruitment for contractors in the home service space. He has been featured in several publications such as the California Business Journal, CEO Weekly, Yahoo Finance, the Detroit News, LA Weekly, and more for his outstanding contributions to the construction industry. He became a millionaire at the age of just 27 and works on celebrity homes in LA, writes books and curriculum, serves as a keynote speaker, and he's actually in the early stages of developing a potential TV show, which I'm excited to hear about. He's got a lot of awesome topics that we're going to be covering here today. And Matt, welcome to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Wade. I'm great.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me your story, how you got started at a young age in the contracting space. And I'm excited to hear about the journey that you're on.
Yeah, I mean, my story is like the very much the blue collar American dream. My great grandfathers came here from Italy, started with nothing. They built their homes from the ground up. And then that passion for the trades passed down to my grandfather, my father, my uncle, and then me. I started, 4, 5, 6 years old. I remember looking at photos of stuff my dad would build. It was back when you'd print out the photos. He'd develop the camera. He'd do it like once a week, and we'd get to see all the pictures of the stuff my dad was doing. And started working when I was 9. Just really loved the trades, being on construction sites. I couldn't wait to get my first pair of work boots. And 9 years old was the first day that my mom's like, you know what? He's got too much energy. Take him out that summer, and the rest is history.
Awesome, man. So what led you into the contracting space specifically? It sounds like you come from a family of people in the trades. At what age did you go to college? Did you become a certified contractor early on? Like what got you into that space specifically?
So my family, it was a little unique. My great grandfathers never started as contractors, right? They built their own homes. They were builders. They knew how to do this. And so, we started working for neighbors. So like my great grandfathers built their homes, and then people started saying, well, hey, can you help me with this? Can you fix that? Can you build this for me? And that's how it started. And so like that passion for the trades really was big with my father and my uncle. And so I got into it at a young age. And then my dad did this thing, which I thought was very smart, which is he had a pay scale, performance-based pay scale, before I ever knew what that was. So I grew very quickly because my dad didn't care that I was 9. As soon as I learned to mix mortar, I got a 50 cent an hour raise. And then as soon as I could cut brick, I got another quarter hour raise. And so that set the path for me growing quickly within the family business. I was running crews at like 15, 16. I mean, my dad would leave me with a set of plans and be like, figure it out, kid. And then I went to a vocational high school where I competed in bricklaying through what's called Skills USA, placed second in the country, went to college for construction management and environmental design. But I was working for my dad. I was interning. I was really, really immersed in this stuff, nights, weekends. I mean, I did a co-op in high school. So that was my hands-on experience at a young age. And then it kind of grew into taking over the business and then doing a lot of other things thereafter.
Awesome, man. So it sounds like now you're heavily involved in like the recruiting space for home services. I know focus on contracting, but also, you said you work with several other moving company owners. What are you hoping to achieve with that?
So this all happened by accident. It's kind of a funny, interesting story. Right around 2019, I believe, I was kind of at the pinnacle of the family business. So I relocated the business to California, kind of almost like a fresh start, rebuilt the business. And right around 2019, I was working on a few celebrity homes. I was doing some government work. So we have like 3 divisions: residential, commercial, and we do government. And the company was just going bananas. Like we were selling, 6-figure and 7-figure contracts daily. I mean, it was nuts. And right around that time, my team kept saying, hey, like we don't have the manpower to do this. Like we're struggling. So-and-so got injured, or this happened, or this person retired. It was just all of this buildup. And I ended up, I had the company almost collapsed, right? We got to a point where my management team brought me in a room and they drew these columns on a whiteboard. And one was all the clients canceling contracts. One was all the liquidated damages. And I was like, I joke, I'm like, I'm a recovering sales junkie because I was so excited by the sales and the contracts and the growth of the business. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that the hiring methods that we had weren't working anymore. Like all of it. I mean, posting on Indeed, posting on Craigslist, like, the relationships we had with people, they were all busy going to the suppliers and saying, who do you know who's slow right now? Nobody was slow. Like it all shifted. And then it got worse during the pandemic. And so it taught me a lesson, which was number one, that sales isn't everything. And number two, I told myself if I couldn't figure this, I mean, I lost nearly $1 million in 3 weeks. Like it was like a freight train going 100 miles an hour and there was no way to stop it. Like it was like the inertia of everything I was doing. Like these were the losses I was going to face. And so I became obsessed with hiring, recruiting, and building teams. And that set a kind of a path or a journey of coaches, mentors, books, me personally doing all the interviews. Like, and that led to a course that we then built and a system. And then now we do it for contractors. But that's kind of the overview or the essence of where it came from, was this horrific time in my life where I almost tanked a 4th-generation business.
Wow. So what have you discovered to find A players, especially, with the labor shortage that most people in our space experienced during COVID? You had a lot of people getting handouts and they weren't as eager to work. And of course, just, we have a different generation now where I know a lot of people in the moving space and the home services in general are finding qualified people as drivers, as tradespeople, as contractors, specialized. And in our business, of course, moving, drivers are probably the hardest people to find because we're competing against Amazon and FedEx and these companies. I think UPS just recently, there was that driver strike and they increased salaries tremendously that it's hard to compete with. What are you doing to help companies find those A players in a time where it is challenging to find great people?
Well, I was lucky and unlucky. So what me being in masonry and concrete in particular, to have somebody good in the field that can run jobs needs to be doing this 10 to 15 years, like minimum. There's no shortcuts on the training. That's what you need. And so I was forced with this really difficult growth problem because I needed to have really good people, but there was no way to shortcut this training. I mean, 3 to 5 years in the business and you're still green as a laborer, even as a mason. So it created this chokehold that I felt like I struggled with finding people. And then I looked at other industries like stucco contractors, fencing contractors, and they had it a little easier because of the training curve. So it was extremely difficult for us to figure this out. What we found when I set out to figure this out, I looked for like a magic bullet. I was like, who is the person that can just tell me how to do this? I wasn't set out to teach this. I wasn't set out to do it for people. I just wanted to figure it out, grow my business, and move on. And what I found was like, I would get tips from people. I'd read a book and some of it would work and some of it wouldn't, or it would work for one hire, but then I couldn't find anyone else. And so what I ended up coming up with was the system, and it's 4 key parts, right? You got to find candidates, fill your pipeline. You have to vet them strategically, meaning move great players to the front of the line, and then have a systematic way to vet everyone else. You need to know how to hire somebody. Do you email the offer letter or do you bring them into your office to close the deal? What does that look like? And then how do you retain them? How do you set them up for success the first 2 weeks, right? Which is most pivotal, really the first few days. And then how do you motivate and maximize them? So it's these 4 key parts. And I discovered this because every time I made a breakthrough, like once I figured out how to fill my pipeline, which we'll talk about, then it broke because I didn't have a way to vet them. I was vetting them like standard 30, 40-minute interviews. And when you've got 16 to 20 candidates a day and you're scheduling regular interviews, my calendar broke, right? I lost people when I went to hire, right? I would email the offer letter and then they would shop it to their competitor. I'm like, oh, that didn't work. And so we figured out this formula and then we eventually put it into a digital course and then transitioned into like doing it for companies. But that's in essence what it is. And so those are the 4 key pillars. We can dive into those if you think it's beneficial.
100%. Yeah. Let's start at the top. That first pillar, how do you fill that pipeline?
Well, so I was speaking at a roofing convention, right? And so we had a bunch of panelists, and this is the easiest way to think about this, in my opinion. So everyone's talking about different ways to do this. And person to my left, they're talking about how to hire. Person to my left, you could tell she was from like corporate world. And she's like, you got to be using digital strategies. You got to be using Indeed. You got to be using the cutting edge tech strategies. Boom. Mike passes. I'm in the middle. Passes to my right now. Gentleman gets up. He's like, that doesn't work. He's like, you got to shake hands, kiss babies, and go to job site. I wait. I grab the mic. I'm like, you got to do all those and more. So it's very market specific. So we start with like, here's some actionable things. Number one, we do what's called a competitor audit. So we look to see what your local competitors are doing to figure out how we can position you better online, right? Is one actionable thing. So you start with this very foundational premise. And then we also like to audit what other companies are doing, big companies that have scaled, what they're doing that maybe aren't in your city or your state even. Go to the biggest cities in the biggest states and pull those companies. They don't even have to be in your industry, and see what they're offering. Figure out, okay, what headlines are they using? What types of incentives are they offering? That's the basic competitor audit. Then you start with one internally. So what's interesting, most companies don't know what to highlight about their own company. So we go with our clients, we'll say, okay, give us your top 3 longest tenured employees. I got John's been here 8 years, Mike's been here 6, Tim's been here 5. Okay, great. Why did they give you 8 years, 6 years, and 5 years of their lives dedicated to your company? Most business owners don't know the answer. They're like, well, we have good pay, we have this. So we have a proprietary system where we audit what they like. We find out all these crazy things. They love the fact that we had one client, right? He's like, well, we're pretty basic. It was a demolition contractor, right? We found out his longest tenured employee was there 17 years. You know why he stayed? 2 reasons. Number 1, never sat home in 17 years. 17 years, never had a day off. The business owner, he forgot. He's like, wow, I didn't really think about that. He's like, I just try and keep the pipeline full. I'm like, that's a big deal. I'm like, and then the other thing was the celebration of family. They're not only their birthdays, like the team members, but birthdays of the wife, the daughter, the son, like they'd be gifts. He's like, I feel genuinely appreciated. We put that on the front end, exponentially better recruiting. And these are just like surface level things that people can do and just listening to this right now. Then there's, how you actually build the pipeline, which is now that you've got some of these things, how do you amplify this?
Gotcha. And so I guess what's kind of, that next step? How do you amplify it?
Well, I mean, I think anybody hiring, you should have a career video. You should have a 60 to 90 second video that showcases who you are, get people to fall in love with you. I mean, there's so many different ways. There's old school strategies and there's digital or tech-based strategies. One of the things we found, for example, is deputizing your team. So getting your team to do the recruiting for you. But there's a very specific way in which this is done. So if you gather up your whole team and you're like, hey, so we're giving $500 to anybody this month that finds us somebody that we can hire, right? And you have stipulations, right? They show up on day 1, they get X amount, and if they stay after 90 days, they get the other percentage. What we found is that works okay. But what works really well is if you can individualize it. So if you can, let's say you're doing a one-on-one with Michelle, and you're like, hey, Michelle, by the way, just want to bring this up to you. And let's say Michelle has a favorite sports team. You say, hey, Michelle, so we're hiring aggressively this month, and we're giving away front row seats to XYZ team. If you bring us somebody, that's a great fit for our team and our culture. And you outline some basic terms, right? Which is like they have to stay for 90 days or 60 days, whatever it is relative to how hard it is for you to find these people. We found that if you can individualize the incentive, in the course we call it incentives to actually work, that person then becomes motivated. Airbnb gift cards, vacations, like things that might cost $400, $500, $600. When you compare that to a recruiter or what it costs to filter people and the opportunity cost, you find that you can actually put your team to work. Most people aren't doing this. Like most people have a team, 10, 20, 50 people. They're not out there hustling for them. That's just a basic foundational one. Then let's say you've got your career video. Let's say you've audited your competitors. Let's say you know why your team loves working there and you've amplified all this in your messaging. Well, it's like, what do? You can post on the basic sites, right? Like your Indeed, your Craigslist, your Zips. Those are great. But there's a lot of other strategies that work well. One of them is geofencing. That's basically where you can put an invisible fence around it could be a competitor if you're that bold. We have clients that do that, right? So when that person walks into the area, to the fenced off, digitally fenced area, and they pull out their phone, they can see an ad that's for hiring. You can also do this for events. You can do this for certain locations where they may pick up supplies, right? So that's a really good digital strategy that we've seen work. I mean, gosh, there's so many. We have 37 proven ways to find people that we built out in the course, and more than that we do for people. But in essence, it's a lot of different things because your local market, there's no more honeypots. Like back in the day, it used to be like I could build a crew off Craigslist or Indeed or Zip. Now it's like you get a little success here and a little success there, and this might get you one person. And so it's the ability to execute all of them at the highest level.
Love that. Most of you have heard me talk about Moversville and the power of their email marketing service that has helped us increase leads by over 112% over the last year. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services and lists like insurance providers, softwares, equipment suppliers, marketing sources, and much, much more. The best part, this resource is free. Go check out Moversville Connect today by going to moversville.com and clicking Connect. That's moversville.com and click Connect and discover the world of Moversville beyond email. One of the worst parts about owning a moving company has to be finding quality movers and drivers. Trying to run all the job ads takes up time, and then you schedule guys to come in for interviews and they never show up. It's a massive headache. Well, let me tell you about a good friend of mine named Winston who runs a company called Move Up Consulting. Move Up specializes in hiring and recruiting for the moving and storage industry, and they do all the lead generation for mover and driver candidates. They have a fully built hiring CRM, plus you get a dedicated account manager who phone interviews and screens all of your candidates. Once they find qualified candidates, they schedule in-person interviews for you and your management team so you can make great hires. They even handle all the appointment confirmations. It's that simple. To start building a better moving team today, visit moveupconsulting.com and tell them Wade sent you. Want to know what the silver bullet for growing your business is? USA Home Listings. USA Home Listings has a myriad of marketing services that are essential to every single moving company. It blows my mind when I have conversations with people who reach out looking for help, trying to get leads, trying to get the phone to ring, that aren't doing mailers and aren't subscribed to USA Home Listings. The data there is so invaluable, and it's not just home listing data, even though that's an awesome, super easy, super intuitive feature that they provide where you can filter out all of the homes that recently went under contract or got listed in your neighborhood, and a new coming soon feature before it even hits the MLS that you can filter out through zip codes, towns, cities, counties, prices. But that's just one small feature that they do. They also have turnkey mailing services. They'll help you design your postcard, a postcard that actually gets results. If you've tried mailers in the past and it didn't work, it's probably because you didn't have the right elements on your postcard. And they also have a social media division. So check out usahomelistings.com. It's an essential addition to all of your marketing needs. Before you do any other marketing, check out usahomelistings.com. Would you say these 37 methods that you found can really be applied to any type of business, or are some of them specific to certain industries? Could movers theoretically use all 37 of these?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are a little bit more like, for example, partner lists. So trade schools, colleges, universities, we call it a one-to-many strategy. So reaching out to trade schools or universities, and saying, hey, look, we're hiring. This is the type of person we're looking for, and getting them to send that out to their alumni list. You can do this with high schools who keep an alumni list. If you've got a really compelling job offer, that's a one-to-many strategy that works really, really well. Partners, referral partners, like we talked about, you can do this with suppliers. You can do this with other trades. Like I have an electrician, for example, for my specific construction company. He sent me a mason 2 weeks ago. He's like, hey, I got this guy. He just moved here, applied. He has a background in electrical and masonry. He's like, I think he'd be a better fit for you. Boom, hire that guy. Cost me, I got him he's a sports fan, right? Big Dodgers guy. So I got him really good Dodgers tickets. Probably cost me $400 for this person. Vetted, excited, came to me, right? So you can deputize or incentivize the people that are other, especially in the moving, like movers. We have movers, demolition contractors, painters. Those businesses are great because the time it takes to learn the skill isn't like, you got to think, we built this out in masonry and concrete, 10 years dedicated for you to be valuable and to run a job site, right? Moving, I imagine is much, much less than that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we honestly, a lot of our practices involve actually not wanting people with moving experience because it comes with a lot of bad habits. And it's, if somebody's been doing moving for 10 years, then, there might be a reason why they're still on the trucks. And sometimes it's not always a great reason. And so, we like to hire for attitude, train for aptitude. We've built out several internal training programs. We're currently working on building out one for the moving industry just to be able to streamline that onboarding and that hiring with mover training videos. We're going to be filming 4 days in a couple weeks. Pretty much everything there is to know about being a mover and a driver, and testing each person that goes through it for each video that we're able to show. We're going to have basically certifications, point systems, so we can kind of gamify the training. And of course, nothing replaces hands-on training. So this is as good of training as you can possibly get through video and virtual. But then there's that hands-on component. How do you typically advise people to conduct training when they bring somebody on, saying that they don't have experience? I know some trades you need several years of experience, but say somebody wants to start off, and it's something that can be learned fairly quickly, at least for those first entry level type roles. What's your onboarding and training process typically look like?
Yeah, so we touch on this and we go over this like in the course, but basically what's most important is there's a couple, like, we look very foundational or principle based, because there's a lot of trainers out there, a lot of coaches, a lot of people that get into like the minutia and the weeds. But in essence, what we found that kind of works universally is, and we scale this across the country, 87 different industries, is number one, making sure that when someone comes in, that they've been assigned a clear understanding of who they need to communicate to, right? Like, do you have a buddy system? Who do they report to? Really emphasizing the first few days of, when they start is crucial. Making sure they have access to all their logins, all that basic stuff, right? Key fundamental is setting them up. So like what we found that works is if you set up a 2-week check-in, a 30-day check-in, and a 90-day check-in, and we make those like our clients and specifically like our companies, we do this with all of them are eligible for a raise. What you'll find is one of the biggest reasons a lot of people quit, it has to do with communication and misunderstanding. And so I'm of the belief that if you're a growing company, you're going to try and do everything right, but chances are you might miss a few things here and there, right? Like you might not be perfect. And the same thing might be the case for the candidate. So when you set up communication points that aren't high pressure, that aren't stressful, and obviously there's all the specific stuff, right? The onboarding docs, like what you're supposed to do. And I think that's company specific, but if you set up communication intervals that are clear and aren't heavy, right? Where it's like, I need to bring this person into the office because they're not doing this. And instead it's like, hey, this is your 2-week check-in. So, here's what we want to start, stop, keep doing, right? So it's like, here's what I'm noticing that we need to have you start. Here's what I want to see you keep doing. Like this basic level of communication we find is really effective, and it gets people excited, because if you can say, like, we have some of our clients where like the average 87% of our new hires get a raise within the first 30 days. How's that for an interesting headline now when you go into the hiring? And that can be real if you have this type of tiered communication model. So we find like a lot of it comes down to just because things move quickly, right? Growing business, a lot of things happening. Communication is crucial. So setting that up. And then we found that a good reward system is crucial too, and getting the team together. So it's like clear communication, having some type of reward system, and then getting the team together. So we came up with a universal thing that we do, which is basically a spinning wheel. And we used to get our clients like company branded poker chips. And so once a month, we encourage them to basically get the entire team together. It could be a breakfast, a lunch. It could be like an afternoon thing, right? Paid for by the company to sponsor, just basic food, sandwiches or breakfast food. And you'd redeem these poker chips for the things that you gave out for people that did a good job. So like a lot of growing companies, they're like, well, I want to have a bonus structured plan, and the legalities around those sometimes get heavy. So it's like when you can incentivize, hey, you did a really good job. You stayed late. Hey, you got a Yelp review. Hey, you did this, like handing these out and then redeeming them in front of the whole team is a great foundational way to build culture, get everyone together, celebrate wins. So those are some basic things that if companies aren't doing them already, you'll find a huge lift in morale, find a big lift in retention. And then honest employee audits is a big one. So we have a proprietary software we use, 1 to 10 scale, completely anonymous, but auditing your team. So figuring out on different key areas, whether it's pay, whether it's job appreciation, we have these key areas, and it's a 1 to 10 scale. And so usually quarterly, we'll do this audit, and a lot of business owners are shocked, right? They're like, how do you think your team feels about their pay? They're like, oh no, everyone gets paid great. They get a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 average. right? So there's some issue with message sent, message received. And sometimes management is blocking that feedback unintentionally. So good auditing systems for your team anonymously is super, super crucial. And that's just like kind of the foundational baseline. And if you're not doing those, you'll get a good lift, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Now, when it comes to pay, obviously everybody always wants to make more money. Like there's no like surprise if employees feel like, they're not getting paid enough and they want to make more money. I mean, is that the most important thing that you found, or are there other aspects like company culture and the fulfillment, the things that, people are doing that are not so tangible that companies can do? Because as business owners, we all have a budget. Like we can only pay so much and still turn a profit and still be able to, basically continue to get business from customers at a, fair market rate. Or even if you have a premium pricing model, there's still always a limit to what you can pay people. I mean, is that really the most important thing when it comes to recruiting and retaining people in our industries? Or is there something else that we can do to kind of compensate for, whatever the pay might be?
Yeah. So it's funny you bring that up. So going back to the spinning wheel. So when I first launched this, I believe it was 4 years ago. I did it in my construction company. Wanted a simple, easy way that it was like, how many chips, right, are we giving out? Like, and so we made these prizes, and we had silly ones like, $5 7-Eleven gift card. We all the way up to like, I think $150 work boot gift card. Like for us, we made it make sense for our size company, right? Which we have 11 crews. We were in 3 divisions. So our stuff was, we had Airbnb gift card. I had $1 an hour raise for a year, but that was a really small one, right? That somebody could win. And so when we made all these triangles basically on this wheel, we misjudged it, and there was like this one little pie wedge. And so my operations, my COO, when we did this, we had the budget for it, right? Like we had calculated how many we would give out typically, and so we didn't want to throw out the budget. So I said, why don't we go to the team and come up with like a silly idea of something that we could give away that doesn't cost any money, because we'd already calculated the budget, like you mentioned, right? Of like how much this would cost, how many different chips we give away, like calculated the odds of them winning these different prizes. And so one of the team member came back and he was like, "Let's do a rubber chicken." I was like, "Okay, let's do a rubber chicken." So mind you, I was probably 2 months into this experiment, right? And my team meetings are video recorded at my yard. I watch them, so like my whole C suite team goes there. Like everyone's there except for me usually. And so I get a recording after, not so that everyone can just be open and have fun and shoot the shit, and it's just a really kind of like fun environment that fits our culture. So I get the recording, and I'm doing work as I'm listening to it, and I hear like squeak, 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 like this noise. What is that? I thought the recording was messed up. And I look, and I think at the time I had 14 or 15 trucks going out every day, right? And 12 or 13 of them all had the foremen all had these chickens. And so they're all squeezing these chickens, right? And one of the foremen who hadn't gotten one yet was redeeming their poker chip. They're putting it down, and they're all going, rubber chicken. You have, 50, 60 people, whatever, 70 people going, rubber chicken, rubber chicken, and squeaking. And I remember I paused the recording and I thought to myself, I looked at the wheel and I was like, okay, dollar an hour raise is $2,000. I'm like, we had a $500 Airbnb gift card, small one. We had a $150 gas card. And I thought to myself, they're literally cheering for a $2 rubber chicken. And I paused and I went, oh my gosh, interesting. And so I learned a lot there. I learned, number one, where are you bringing, and then it brought me back to like working with my dad. And I'm like, where are we bringing in fun? Where are we bringing in family? Where are we bringing in like the community? So to answer your question, no, I think far from it. I think when you find the things that are fun, that are like, we have rubber chickens in our trucks. Like if you don't win one, you're not cool, right? Like that's the silly culture at my construction company, that like that means something to them. Like that is a funny thing. They're like, all right, new guy, let's see how long before you get one. Like it's a silly thing. It costs nothing. So they want that over $1 an hour raise for a year, which costs the company $2,000. So to answer your question, I don't think it is. I think when you figure out fun, when you figure out relationships, when you figure out those things, those are the memories and the things that are important that your team members will value, far, far surpasses anything you can pay them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you can really, be a good leader. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to leadership and creating that culture, creating a fun environment, creating fulfillment for people, letting people feel recognized. And then giving them, opportunities to earn, I believe in performance pay heavily. In our business, movers get a lot of tips on jobs from clients. And so we're always looking at ways that they can earn more tips. And it typically comes down to great customer service and doing a good job and working hard and hustling to where they provide such a good service that the customer feels like they didn't pay enough for how good of a service that was provided. And a lot of times those they feel inclined to want to reward the actual guys sweating with an additional, funds that they feel like are valued at for the service that those guys actually were able to provide them. And just, from the leadership perspective, like to be a beacon that people are drawn to and to be somebody that people want to work for. There's a lot of stuff that can be done on that front. So I'm really glad you brought that up. That's really interesting stuff. Now, are most of your guys like paid as independent contractors? Are they W-2 employees? Can you talk about some of the pros and cons of bringing in independent contractors that may work for other firms or contractors or home services, but also help you fill in the gaps when things slow down? Or are you pretty much strictly on like the W-2, like you only work for us? Like, what are some pros and cons that you see with that? Because we see a lot of that in our industry where where movers will hire independent contractors to, when drivers are on the road, or it's really seasonal in our industry where we have a lot more business certain times of the year and certain times of the month than other times. So it can be difficult to keep people on board just because work demands sometimes slow down periodically. And what have you found is kind of the best for those situations?
We find that it's very, like you mentioned, industry specific. So like in the course when we were building that, we put a whole section about staffing agencies, temp labor companies, independent contractors. How do you vet them? I think the big things there, it's a useful tool, setting up relationships too with companies, figuring out, like, we had one client that found out essentially, was able to hire, like, they do a lot of winter work and they get a lot of snow removal contracts. And so they figured out what industries local to them are laying people off in the winter and made agreements with those contractors. Like, hey, look, I get that. Like, for example, a lot of masonry and concrete companies, we lay off if we don't have indoor work. So we taught this client, this was a consulting client, we're like, hey, go out to these 4 or 5 different industries, find companies within these industries and create agreements, because the company likes that too, because the masonry company knows, oh, they're only going to work in one place, they'll keep busy, and then they'll come back to me. No one's going to try and poach them long term. So I think there's all kinds of creative solutions you can use. I think they're great. I think the big thing is culture and managing culture and communication with the team. Like, for example, if you're in like masonry or concrete or general contracting or any of these things, sometimes you need to flex your labor force. Like, we have projects where I might need an extra. We did a project where we were doing a famous hotel in Hollywood, and I think it was 10,000 rooftop pavers had to be brought up to the roof, and we could not use a crane and we couldn't use the elevator. We had to bring them up the stairs. That was the logistics of the job. It's a big change order. So we got an agreement with a temp staffing company. We brought, I think, 30 or 40 people to help us for however many days we needed. And the main thing that we had to manage is culture. Like, our team letting them know, like, hey, look, they're coming in to help us. They're not our everyday team members. Like, managing that communication is crucial, because I find that sometimes the in and out, which is the 1099, they don't treat it like it's their forever job. They don't have that investment in the long-term growth. And so sometimes managing that communication with your team is potentially one of the biggest pitfalls. But if you can do it well, like a lot of our clients, what we're seeing, it's a huge tool. I mean, it's a massive scaling tool to have that flexibility.
Love that. Let's shift gears a little bit. One of the things that it looks like a talking point, if you will, is the shift in relationship between contractors and homeowners, and how to leverage and build a brand and demand top pricing to rule the marketplace. Can you talk on those two topics?
Yeah, I mean, what I think was a pillar for us in my family business was, so we didn't start as contractors. We started as people who worked on our homes, and then we grew. Like, there's a joke in my family that we became contractors when we worked for people who spoke English. So originally, it was an Italian section outside of Boston, because my great grandfathers only spoke Italian, and so my grandmother and grandfather as kids had to translate the agreement, right, for English speaking clients. So my grandfather as a kid told me, he said, two things you need to know in this business. Never forget these two things that I never have. Number one, an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Never try and retire off any one customer. Like, it'll never happen. Then number two, treat customers like they're your neighbors. He's like, and he pointed to Mrs. Jones who lived next door. He said, if the client was Mrs. Jones, and you ask yourself, what would I do for Mrs. Jones? You will always make the right decision. And so I think into that relationship piece is so easy. And that's like a culture piece that we have throughout the company. Like, people are like, what do I do? Do I do this or that? What would you do if they're your neighbor? Well, I would do this. Well, there you go. You figured it out. So I think getting back,
I like that.
Yeah, that relationship piece is crucial. And then looking at your brand, I mean, I think your brand, I'm a simple guy, right? No business background. So when you have your brand, it's like, all you're doing is you're making a promise to your clients and then you're making a promise to your team. So keep your promises. Like, if we go out there and we tell our clients we're the best, like you mentioned earlier, pay for performance, the best service that you've ever gotten, they basically got way more than they could have ever paid for. If that's the promise to your clients, then make a promise, right? We make a promise to our team that we're going to treat you amazing. You can achieve all the things that you want. Like, as businesses, our job is to build a company big enough to fit the dreams of every single person who works there inside. And like, that is my number one goal. That's why I grew the business. Like, when we were doing celebrity homes and things were great, I'm like, I don't need to grow this anymore. But I was talking about me. When it became about my team members, I was like, oh shoot, I actually do have to grow top line. I had to explode top line. I had to explode bottom line, because if I want people making $1 million a year in my company, we have to make more. Like, top line has to grow. And so I think it's making a really good, strong promise to your clients, and then making a strong, letting your team know what that promise is, and then making a promise to them that if they uphold the promise you made to your clients, you will get them what they want. Like, that's in essence, what I think makes a business grow and flow in its simplest form. Like, I've heard a lot of different ways of putting it, but mine is just promise your client something, tell your team what the promise is so they know what they're upholding, and make sure you make good on the promises for them upholding your deal to the client.
I love that. Tommy Mello speaks a lot of those same principles. You know, he says his dream has to be so big that it can fit everybody else's dream inside. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. That's a really, really good way to look at it, because it's easy to get comfortable sometimes. You know, things are going well. You as the owner are making a lot of money. You know, your life is not too stressful because you've got, you know, a good customer base, you've got a good team, but ultimately, you know, you want to be able to continue to grow so that you can continue to provide your team with the best trucks and the best equipment and the, you know, most, you know, highest compensation packages and the benefits, and be able to allow them to achieve their own goals, whether that's home ownership, buy a new car, send their kids to college, whatever the case is. You carry a lot of that burden as the owner, and that's awesome, man. I really like that. You know, going back to like some of that geofencing stuff, are you using that mostly to recruit top talent, or are you also using geofencing for customers and getting, you know, building your brand that way with acquiring new clients?
You can do it for both. I mean, we've seen success with both. And geofencing, I mean, some markets, some clients on the hiring side works great. Some, it works moderately well. So it goes back to that kind of rule of like, you look at football, right? There's no one magic play that you can play, right? You don't call one play and it's magic and it works every time and you're going to win the game, right? Things change, conditions adapt. And so it's specifically when you ask about whether it works for clients or whether it works for in the hiring space or both, it's like trying different things in your marketplace. It's definitely a good tool for both. But then in your market, you might find, hey, this works great for hiring, but not so good for customers, or vice versa. I think it's the biggest takeaway that I got when we came up with when we counted how many different ways we found to find candidates was it was the bigger the playbook, the more likely anybody listening, let's call it the hiring playbook, if you will. The more plays you have that you can call, the more likely you are to win the game, because you have different ways of approaching the problem. If this isn't working, I can try that. And that's what we found. Like, we've had some clients where like one of the things we didn't touch on is incentives for like your team. So like, we've got a moving client, and what he does is he gives a professional massage once a month to all of his movers. Costs $40, right? $40 times, I think he has 30 clients, $1,200 a month. Once a month, they go out and they treat themselves good, their bodies. It's his way of saying, I respect the physical work that you do. And also their wives, girlfriends, families, well, where's dad, or where's your husband? They'll get a massage, right? And so like these are little things where it's like, yeah, we have the budget, but what does that do to morale, performance? How much more efficient can you hire? So I think it's I just wanted to slip that one in as another technique, another tool that creates a lift in your hiring.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We've done chiropractic for our movers because they're obviously, moving heavy things, bending over with their backs. But I like the massage idea. That's a nice little perk there. Good stuff. When you're geofencing for recruiting, where are you setting up those geofences, and what platforms are you doing it through?
So we find you want to find an expert that manages this like ads, like the same way you find somebody to manage your Facebook ads. Like you can use Ground Truth, or there's a bunch of different kind of integration platforms, if you will. But in terms of geofencing, like a lot of our clients, if you've got like, for example, with plumbers, electricians, HVAC, we found that one creative thing to do is to geofence your supplier, because then your competitors, their foremen are typically trusted with the truck or driving in there, they're grabbing material, right? And a lot of suppliers aren't going to let you. We tried this years ago. I was like, hey, let me put a big sign that we're hiring on the desk. They're like, yeah, what's that going to do to all the other customers that come here? You try to poach their people. So we found that that's a workaround. There's also one of the things we've done too is you can sponsor. There's a loophole around that. We've had clients do this in, oh my gosh, states across the country. You can go to if there is a supplier where you buy, like, let's say you're buying a lot of boxes or moving supplies, or maybe a truck rental place that is relevant to movers. You can say, look, I'd like to sponsor coffee and donuts maybe once a week. Maybe for us, like my company, my construction company, we do it like every day for the two big suppliers that we have this with, because it works money wise. But you say, I want to sponsor coffee and donuts in the morning for 2 hours, get someone to drop it off, or get somebody that works there, just pick it up on the way in and flip them, $10, and they get some for themselves. And say in exchange for that, on the table, I'd love to put a little tiny card that says we're hiring with a little QR code. We've made amazing hires, clients have too, because you get talent that's working, that is trusted with a company truck, that has a license, and a lot of suppliers will allow it because you're giving something. It's just this little card, but when they're waiting to get loaded up, like this is mainly for like my masonry, concrete, your landscapers, like when they're waiting to get loaded up, they're like, oh wow, we have coffee and donuts, and they look down and see top pay, local work, like whatever the three big things you are, and a QR code that you can scan works really, really well. And a lot of the suppliers are open to that because it's not directly kind of, it's like you're offering something before just saying, hey, can I just put something down on the table?
Yeah, that's smart. It's kind of that law of reciprocity. You do something nice, and you just happen to be attached and associated with whatever you're doing that creates value for others. What's in it for them at the end of the day. What about estimating? How do you implement a virtual estimate process to maximize the profitability and to grow your sales team? We have a lot of on-site estimators that go out and do jobs for bigger moves. We do virtuals too. We use a program called Live Switch. There's some other programs out there. There's going to be one that's going to be releasing soon called ComeHome.ai that uses AI to help with virtual estimating process. But what do you do in your contracting business with virtual softwares, and how does that affect profitability? Like, what are the benefits there?
Yeah, so this we were doing this well before the pandemic, and it came from the belief that I thought clients in our industry, and moving is going to be a little different. Well, actually, it's probably similar in the sense that people don't necessarily know what it costs. I guess in moving, they'll know more what they're looking for. In our world, like clients don't know. They're like, is this a mason? Is this a concrete person? What so you have that barrier to it. But what we found that makes it successful, we've got a completely process mapped out, right? Like if you call the office, it's like we either do a free virtual estimate or we do a paid on-site estimate, $97. So we don't do free estimate, but that's just the LA market because that's where we position the brand and how we've grown it. But for the virtual side, they send in photos. There's a short video. It talks about how many photos to send in, what it needs to look like. Super easy. The office is building the rapport on the front end to make sure that we get the commitment for them to follow through. All that stuff kind of flows into one another. But when they end up on the call, we pull up the photos, we talk through their project, we ask them questions, build rapport, and we're able to give them a budget of what they can expect to spend. Um, One of the things we found that works well is at the end of that call, we can incentivize if they book within a certain amount of time, there's a discount. or an incentive, a savings for certain projects that we saw increase booking rates quite a bit. But it was an ability for us, and we do FaceTime and we do Zoom calls, and we try and get them like we'll set it virtual first, a lot of times over the phone, but we'll try and get the people that are technology capable and enjoy tech to be face to face because we found that that's a really big booster of conversion. But it's a way for us. Like for example, we do 4 an hour. So when you think of LA traffic and you think of like my local market, let's say a salesperson, it's about 2.5, 3 hours per appointment when you factor on like them driving there, spending an hour with the client, right? Plus or minus 45 minutes to an hour 15, driving to the next location. We're able to do 4 an hour. So if I have somebody work a 7 hour day, productive 7 hours, they're doing 28 clients versus being able to do 3 to 4. So we're able to touch so many more people and not have the cost of fuel, not have the cost of wear and tear on the vehicle, and get in front of clients. And so our whole value proposition is, and this is a little bit difficult for us, but our goal is to give them more value over the phone than they would get from the average contractor in person. Like that is our promise.
Mm,
And we're able to
I like that.
identify things in photos, yeah, that people are like, I met with somebody here and they didn't bring that up. Like we pull the house up on Google and we go over notes and we pull up their pictures and we ask them for certain measurements. We have a scaling tool where we can scale things out on the pictures. And so we're able to give them more through a phone in a 15 or 20, 15-minute conversation than a lot of companies can do in person. And that's, I think, the secret sauce for us that has made it really, really, really effective.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't know any other moving companies that charge for on-site estimates. We like to do them for especially bigger jobs just because we've seen our booking percentages really double when we can get somebody out there in person, see them face to face. And we're kind of in between on virtual. So like the lowest converting is over the phone. The highest converting is getting somebody out there to meet the customer face to face, do a full walkthrough, address those concerns, go through the sales presentation packet. And then, there's the virtual component there that if it's somebody that's moving from far away or they're outside of our normal radius of territory, that it's just tough, or they just have a busy schedule and it's tough for them to, get somebody out to their home for an hour. That's where the virtual comes into play. So we're kind of in the middle ground with that. Do most people in your space charge for the on-site estimate? I think that would be awesome if we could charge for those, but I don't, because they book at a higher rate and because nobody else does it. It's been a tough sell. I mean, how did you get into charging for on-site estimates?
Well, this goes back to kind of testing, right? Every market I think is different and it's all relative to the market, location, and competitors. So what I realized, like our thing is we have like our decision, like my average ticket is about 60 to 70 grand. Like my company, salespeople sell on average about 120
Oh,
grand,
okay.
right? Like that's an average 100 to 130 grand a week. Salesperson, like, job might be 30 to 500,000 bucks. We might do a backyard for 1 million. So like our whole dynamic is different. Like if I were in the moving space, or we were talking to somebody in that regard, like I don't know that charging would make sense. It creates a lot of friction, but for us, the friction is helpful because it's like there's a lot of contemplation. It's very difficult to figure out what types of companies exist. It's like, well, am I getting, a used Toyota? Am I getting a new Toyota? Or am I getting the BMW of this industry? And so we wanted to make it clear, like we're charging, and for us it was about charging to give knowledge. So we have a consultative method. We don't have any like there's no high pressure sales. Like we go out, most knowledgeable meeting you'll have as a client. Like we're just giving you knowledge about all your
Mm,
but it's totally different. Like that was the gap. I found the gap in my industry, which was my competitors fell under two main buckets. One was the owner operator who was super knowledgeable. He's doing the estimates and doing the work. He or she knew a lot, but didn't have the time to go really deep, running around doing all this stuff. The other one was the trained salesperson. Didn't really know the tech side of it, but they were really people friendly. And I'm like, well, what if you could have both? What if you could have somebody who's super tech and knew all of the different ways to build a wall, the different materials and measurements and grades and drainage and all the stuff we do, but had an hour and a half if you wanted it or 2 hours to go through everything with you. And then we tested it. So I charged $47 when I first rolled it out. And I took all of those calls, like literally every single one. Like I had my office. I was like, give me 10 calls. Boom. I was like, $47. We used to keep a check, and I would bring a check and I would show the clients. We send them a picture, and we had a double your money back guarantee. So we said, if we're not the most knowledgeable masonry and concrete company you call out, we will literally, every salesperson, we call them project consultant that comes out has a check. They're authorized to give you a double your money back refund. They have to have that check on them. And so that's how we started it.
Wow.
And then nobody ever asked. And then we bumped it up to 97. But I think the real, like, distilling this, it's what's the, I play a game, right? And this is what I find is really effective. I put on two hats, right? One hat is my selfish business owner hat. Like, what do I want? Well, I don't want salespeople driving around to wasted appointments. I want less salespeople and more yield. Like, I literally wrote out a Venn diagram. Then I put on my customer hat. And I said, what are all the things that I hate? I hate calling a company out for a concrete wall and finding out it's a brick wall. I hate bringing somebody out that's 3 times my budget. And I'm like, that was a waste of time. Like, I hate not knowing what things cost roughly, because if I can't afford it, it's embarrassing. Like, I wrote out all of the things that I knew that I would want as a customer. And then I figured out, how do I blend the two needs? And so that's what I would do in your space. I would look at it and say, all right, what are the things that customers don't like? Like, what are the things that they complain about? What are the things that competitors are doing? What are the bad reviews other companies get? And I would build a model, because that's all I did. I built a model for my industry, my market. But you could take the same psychology and do it anywhere. It's leveraging kind of the gaps. And how do I make it modern and more efficient and with technology for those who like that path?
Wow, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Because we call our salespeople moving consultants, and we try to kind of sell through service, through that consultation. And I see what you're doing, because like if somebody's committed $97, they got some skin in the game now, and they're going to, take that very seriously. But you're also weeding out, tire kickers that, are otherwise not qualified to purchase. If they can't come up with $97, they're probably not gonna be able to come up with $60,000. And it kind of makes them, kind of committed already, in a sense, while also qualifying the leads. So you don't have salespeople just driving around aimlessly, spending money on gas and maintenance and time, to get out there. But that's something really interesting to think about. I'm wondering how we can apply even more of a consultative approach, when we go out to these homes, educating the consumer. Should they do it themselves? Should they, what they need to be asking when they are talking to other moving companies, what are different ways that they can protect the items in their home from damage, or the properties from damage, all those things. I'm sure we could, that'd be a fun exercise that, I'm going to be marinating on a little bit, see what we can do there. So Matt, how can people get a hold of you? What ways would you like to connect with moving company owners? What products do you carry that, might be beneficial to moving company owners?
The website, the Contractor Consultants, plural.com. I mean, where our big thing is in the hiring space. We started off, like I mentioned, we built the course, and then I had somebody on social that was like, if you're so good, why don't you just do it for people? And so that's how we started doing it. We charge a flat, low monthly rate. We do it per position. So, it's $1,500 a month. We do up to 3 different positions within a company, C-suite, all the way down to your entry level. It allows you to try out as many people as you want. There's no hidden fees. We have a money back guarantee. Like, our thing is, how do we put money in the hands of business owners and get them results? That's not a recruiter paying 25% of the salary, or a staffing agency where you're getting a markup on the hourly rate. How do we allow companies to build their backlog of candidates, be able to try people, be able to own their own recruiting processes, and we kind of handle the administrative burden. So we do all the job postings, 157 platforms. We do the resume screening. We do the first round interviews. And then the business owner comes in and just does second round interview. And then if they like the person, move them to the next stage, which is usually a skills assessment. If they don't, then we send them the rejection information directly, so they don't have to. But yeah, I'm really proud of what we've done. We're able to save, like, we celebrate in our Slack channel, each position, we calculate the amount of money we saved the business owner. So like before I got on here, we saved a demolition contractor $9,000 on a laborer that he hired. Like, that's the stuff that I think is real exciting. And if there's any way we can help anybody listening, happy to do that.
Awesome. Matt DiBara, thank you for coming on to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. Definitely reach out. He's got some really good stuff. This has been an awesome conversation, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Wade.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you would like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan retreat, or interested in owning or working for Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.